Good afternoon. My name is Mike Samuelson. I'm the chair of the Infrastructure Committee of Narberth Borough Council. On the Tuesday, May 26th meeting to order. With me today are Mike Gaudini, who's the vice chair of the committee, Joe Stratton, who's the other member, Tony Paolozzi, who's from our engineering firm. Jeff Eldon is just stepped out for a minute, and who's the director of public works, and Maggie Gallups, who's our borough manager. So first order of business is the approval of the minutes for our March 24th, 2026 meeting.
Move to approve minutes.
I second.
Any discussion, corrections? No? Okay, so moved. Are you in favor? Okay, we have two things on the agenda, the stormwater bump outs for Windale and Shady Lane on safety fencing. I suspect a lot of people in the audience are here to talk about the stormwater bump outs. So rather than I talked to Ms. Dawes, we normally keep public comment at the end, but I want to allow for public comment on the stormwater bump outs before we take a vote. So if you're here for the stormwater bump outs, bear with me, and we will hear from you before we make our recommendation. So I would like to start with, before we have the discussion on the stormwater bump outs, just a recommendation to council, a motion to recommend that we approve, or recommend to council, I always say this one, the approval of the stormwater bump outs final design as provided by the engineering firm for Windale Road and Shady Lane. So
That's our base motion?
yes.
Yeah, I'll make that base motion.
I second that.
Okay. Tony, you want to give us the background, or Maggie, do you want to just start with sort of a general view of sort of the process that got us to this point, maybe before we turn over to Tony for final design?
Sure. So this is coming to us because we have what's called a MS4 permit requirement. This is a state mandated requirement for not just the borough, but most municipalities in the state of Pennsylvania. MS4 stands for its 4 S's: municipal separate storm sewer.
Something system.
Something. Municipal separate storm sewer is the system.
System, yeah.
So the MS4 permit requirement. So this was issued to us by DEP 6 years ago, and it required us to meet a certain minimum remediation steps for sediment reduction. So our particular permit is focused on sediment reduction as opposed to like nutrient or phosphorus loading. And this is not a stormwater management in terms of flow, volume, or rate control. This is a water quality measure that we are required to implement per our MS4 permits. So the state came and said, hey, Narberth Borough, you have to reduce sediments up to a certain amount within this permit period. But then they walk away, right? They don't tell us how we're supposed to reduce the sediments or what sort of implementation steps, and they don't provide us any money to do this. So this is something that we have to come up with on our own. In order to meet then that sediment reduction requirement that the state mandated for us, we worked with our engineers at Pannoni to come up with what is the best thing that we can do given our limited land mass that we have to implement our sediment reductions that we're required to meet by state law. Thus was born the stormwater bump out map that shows a list of various places throughout the borough that we can implement these stormwater water quality features. This was based on analysis done by Pannoni, and I can let Tony explain that to you a little bit better. But essentially, we analyzed the streets of the borough to find out where would be the best places due to the topography and geography where we can best capture that sediment. So we have a list of about 30 some potential sites that was generated a couple of years ago, and Borough Council has since that time been identifying from that master list the ones that we want to implement during that particular year, and then that is how we're coming up with the implementation that we have. So we've implemented how many to date? I believe 6?
We implemented 8.
8, I'm sorry. So we've implemented 8 so far since 2022. Apologies, I wasn't here then, so thank you for it. So 8 since 2022. We've been averaging about 2 per year. Some years have been more. Last year we did 4. And so when we were looking at our implementation this year, Windale was targeted for its kind of bang to buck ratio, to put it in very layman's terms. But essentially, the location on Windale, the amount of sediment that we're able to capture there is high. And this particular road was targeted for implementation. Again, it was included in the master list, and it was decided that we would look to implement the bump out on that road this year because of its high capture rate for sediments, and also because from a cost perspective, Windale classifies as a low volume road, and we've been very successful in working with the County Conservation District in the past at getting grant funding to cover some or all of the implementation costs of these stormwater bump outs on low volume roads. So last year we implemented 2 bump outs on Grayling Avenue by the church. That was a low volume road. We were able to get grant funding to cover, I believe, the full cost of those or nearabouts.
It was pretty close to the full.
Pretty close to the full cost. So again, unfunded mandate by the states. We have to implement stormwater bump outs in order to meet our sediment capture because we don't really have a lot of other options. We don't have a lot of other land. And so from a cost perspective, the bump outs on Windale particularly are appealing because again, we can qualify for that grant. So it's a financially feasible, and it allows then for that sediment capture to continue to maintain our permit requirements for that sediment reduction. So I'm going to pause there and see if we have any other. Mike, did that cover?
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect. Thanks. I appreciate it.
I wanted to also just, because folks maybe everyone kind of got that, but I know when I've talked with folks, things like sediment reduction and other things are technical terms, but like in layman's terms, and y'all may have already gotten this, but just in case there's anyone out there that didn't, talking about when it rains, stormwater runs off, it picks up gunk, litter, other things like that. Our water system tends to run to the creek, basically. That's how it was built years ago to send water towards that. So what we're really talking about here is facilities that try to trap the gunk and filter out more of it, so that when the water makes its way into the stream, we've removed as many pollutants as we can. Obviously, it's, each of these things is kind of incremental in their own way, but that's the overall goal. And as was mentioned, the state gives us basically a overall figure for how much gunk we have to remove from that system, or what our goal is. And the state also controls, in the kind of reference to crediting, the state controls how much credit we get for that. So stormwater bump outs of the same size here versus there might get very different crediting. And we make our pitch to the state, Tony, I believe is correct. Like we pitch to them how much we believe the crediting is worth, but then it's ultimately up to them to approve whether we actually get that level of crediting or different level of crediting. It's also up to them, the state, to approve whether the design is eligible for any crediting at all. So one of the questions I've heard is, well, why stormwater bump outs versus stream bank restoration, for instance? And I know that we had looked at different things, like we now have that piece of land along Windward Road known as Elm Grove Park. When we did the master parks plan, we asked them to look at, is there a way to do stream bank restoration to get credit? And the answer was basically no. Given what we were actually able to do there, we didn't think at that time the state was going to give us any credit for that. We will probably do some storm bank restoration there because it will have beneficial environmental effects. But there's a lot of that has come into the plan that was adopted in 2020 in terms of, it's not just, we get to kind of do whatever we want. We also have to work within how the crediting works, what the state will actually approve. And then we do actually have, even given all of that, we do have a number of different strategies in our plan. It isn't just the stormwater bump outs, but the stormwater bump outs ended up being a major component of it, simply because unlike other municipalities, like Lower Merion, I think covered a lot of theirs because they have a lot of large tracts of land where they could kind of just do that on their own. And we really didn't. So we do have other strategies, but the stormwater bump outs just ended up being the thing that we could do given the various different constraints you already heard about. Did I miss anything in that?
The only other thing I would add is that we have multiple watersheds in the borough. Shockingly, we're not actually all in the same watershed. We have 3 that we're a part of, and our sediment reduction requirements are in one of the watersheds. So that's the other thing too, is that if we could do some sort of project in an area of the borough, it wouldn't count towards our credits unless it was in the watershed that is being regulated by the permit. So that's the other thing too, is that we have areas of the borough where we can do work, but it's not going to count towards the crediting, as Michael was saying, because it's not in the same watershed. So we have to keep our energies focused on that watershed because that is the area that is regulated by this permit.
I just want to clarify, there are 3 watersheds, but only one of the 3 is affected by the work we need to do. We need to do the work in only one of the 3 by the permit. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
And that's the Indian Creek.
Yeah.
What's the name of the overall watershed?
I think it's East Branch of the Indian Creek.
The East Branch of the Indian Creek. So I mean that is the largest area. So the borough is predominantly within the Indian Creek watershed, but we do also drain into 2 other watersheds.
Thank you.
And that's why you don't see an even distribution of these stormwater bump outs across the borough, because we're focused on the Indian Creek watershed. That's what we're required to try and keep the sediment from going into. So, people are like, hey, how come there's one not outside of your front yard, Mike Salmons? And the answer is because I don't drain in that direction.
So the two pump outs that we're proposing here are both on Windale Road. One of the first being close to the low point along Windale Road, which is around where Shady Lane is. That pump out is proposed in front of 94 Windale Road. And then the second bump out is a little bit further up Windale, closer to the cul-de-sac. That one we're proposing to be placed in front of 71 Windale. The look of them are pretty much the same as the previous bump outs that we've done in the past. We think that the consistency in how they look is beneficial. So there's not much to the design that we've changed, and we expect that they'll work. Expect that they'll work, just the same as the previous bump outs, and we're expecting that we'll be able to get a good amount of credit from DEP for these, which is why we selected this particular street for this year.
Hello, can you hear me? I don't know if.
I'm sorry, hold on. We're not taking questions just yet. We're reviewing, but we'll open up to public comment. So please hold that thought. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
I just got an email a little while ago asking about, I guess there's a fire hydrant near on the other side of the street maybe, and somebody was like, hey, could you put it in front of the fire hydrant, because then that's not losing another parking space anyway. I don't know whether from a regulatory standpoint that's even possible.
Yeah, actually, originally we proposed to have the bump out pretty almost in front of the fire hydrant, because that fire hydrant is also very close to a stormwater inlet. And ideally, the closer that we bring the bump out to the inlet, the better. That way, when water leaves the bump out, there's less opportunity for that water to pick up more, gunk, as Michael used. So originally we did have it there, and I talked to the fire marshal, and they do not want any bump outs outside of there or within a fire hydrant, because even though it's not a vehicle, it still creates that same obstruction that a vehicle would have. So he said at a minimum he'd like to see at least 15 feet of clearance, and with other obstacles, like there's a driveway kind of in that area too. So the driveway plus the fire hydrant, it would have created a very small bump out. So we kind of eliminated it from away from the fire hydrant altogether and moved it up the street a couple units.
Okay. I sort of vaguely remember that it had been a little bit further down initial, so. And
Yeah.
then I got this email today, and I was like, oh, it kind of makes sense, so. Okay, we're just only gonna talk about the bump outs for now. If you have public comment on another issue, if you could hold off on that until we actually get to that on the agenda. But we do want to hear, I know that there's at least a couple of people here who want to talk about Wendell. So we just start in the first row, and then we'll go row by row, and then we'll take comments online. So if you can just state your name and a street address.
Betty Kennedy, 94 Windale Road. So we're talking about bump outs in front of my house. I have no objection to its placement. I have questions about, when we moved in 40 years ago, we spent a lot of money to put granite curbing in. Is that going to be disturbed? Or if you have to destroy the curbing to build this bump out, can you put granite curbing back when it's done, when construction is finished?
Yeah, we're proposing to keep the existing curb that's there, and if the contractor damages it, it'll be their responsibility to repair it appropriately.
Okay, my second question is, since this is going to have, I presume, water soaking into the ground within it, is that going to affect my cellar? I'm one of the few houses on the Road that does not get water in the cellar.
What's your secret?
There shouldn't be a reason that it'll create any water in your cellar. It's well far away from your dwelling, so we don't expect that. We haven't heard of any other issues previously with the past bump outs.
Tony, could you describe what happens when the water goes into the bump outs, where it goes from there?
Yeah, I mean, so some of it will percolate into the ground. It'll travel underground and kind of percolate underground as groundwater does. But the majority of it will fill up in the bump out itself and exit out of the other side of the bump out. So with any given storm event, there's not too much water that will percolate. Most of it will continue down the road and into the houses.
Tony, is there a detail that I can show that would demonstrate that?
Yeah, it should be, on the left there. That detail shows a cross section of the bump out itself. So we have about 12 to 18 inches of what we call biomedia, which is a type of soil that encourages infiltration. So water will fill up into that area first, and then it'll slowly flow underneath that. Once that first 12 to 18 inches of soil builds up, then the bump out itself above the ground will fill up, and then eventually exit the downstream side of the bump out.
Hi, Peter Schmitz. I'm at 105 Wendell Road, at the corner of Shady Lane there. I'm interested. I see one bump out there in front of Kennedy's house. I see looks like a proposed realignment of the corner opposite my house. And I know Jim contacted the borough about that. I would be just as happy to have if remediation is going to be done on his corner. That most of this is about the huge trash trucks that we have in the borough, and they run over my yard and hit it regularly. But that's not part of the remediation. That's a separate project.
Yeah, that's a separate project.
Yeah.
So we are, I don't know if you were made aware of this, but we are going to try and sort of fix the slant so that when the trucks come around the corner, that they're not constantly crashing onto yours.
Yeah, I
and
can see
doing
it on
slants.
one side but not the other. I'd be happy for them to do both sides. If that is, but that all depends on what you budgeted for. So I'm unclear, however. I see the one in front of the Kennedy's house, but I've heard mention of two. Is there only one?
No,
There's two. It's on a different plan set. So here's the, wrong way.
They're both on that same sheet. Yeah, one of them being on the top of the sheet.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
The sheet.
So the other one is in front of 71 Windale.
Cindy, Right. I, living at 105, as I do, I have for the past 21 years, I've watched what happens when there's lots of water, and there's a big, as you can see, it's marked there on the map, there's a big grate right at the bottom of my driveway. My driveway used to be the head, I believe, of East Indian Creek, where there was a spring house there, historically. So the reason my driveway is sort of looks like a riverbed is because it was. And now the stream has gone underground, and then it goes down under your driveway and out down to the eventually where it comes above ground and farther down the hill. But if this was a natural habitat, that bottom of my driveway would quickly become a wetland, because every huge rain, there's what I call Lake Windale forms there, because the leaves come rushing down and they fill up the grate, and then the water gets trapped, and I go down there with a rake and I clear it all out. Very well, all of you. So I was wondering why the bump out isn't closer to that grate, because that seems to me the place where all the water is heading. You see, so it's now on the other side of the street, and you do get some buildup on the grate on your side of the street, but not nearly as much as I get on mine. But will the bump out that's farther up 2070, proposed at 2071 now, reduce the water and exterior matter flow down the street to the grate in front of my driveway?
It might a little bit. There's another inlet that's further up Windale, closer to 71, which is why we placed the bump out further up there to capture sediment before it reaches that particular inlet. So that bump out's capturing most of the water and sediment that would otherwise go into that inlet. It's mostly separate to this inlet that we see here, toward 405 here.
One up the road is not a grate in the street, so it counts on water flowing underneath the curb.
Okay, right. Yes.
A grate in the street would capture more water.
Yeah. So yeah, some of that water will bypass, that inlet that's further up Windale. It'll bypass that inlet and then, get captured by this inlet outside 105. So there will be some, some benefit. It will, capture some of that water that would otherwise make it to 105. But primarily we're focusing on, capturing it before it reaches that further up.
Is there not a pipe that's underneath the verge section on that side of the street that's carrying water down the hill? That was my impression as to why there are no trees allowed in that verge, because there's a pipe underneath there.
I'm not 100% sure how all the pipes are situated.
Jeff, do you know whether there's pipe under the verge?
It walks a bit, so there's some portions that are other birds or something.
Gotcha. And I think jumping way back, the question of whether this is a separate kind of project, not the curb piece.
Right.
My understanding is it is a separate project, but we were potentially going to add alternate this when we bid it out. So it would actually be handled as, it would all get done at once, even though it's separate.
From a cost
Is that
saving
correct?
standpoint, we're gonna bid it as two parts of the same project, just
Right.
because if they're there anyway, we're gonna.
Well, since I'm going to just go on the record, I'd be happy for that to be equal cut on either side to allow, but the truck wants to go up the street and.
Yeah, and it comes back around.
It won't make no sense to do just one side. You want to make it equally wide, I think, to increase the ability of large vehicles. There's a lot of delivery vehicles going up and down there every day. Google Maps sends them that way all the time. So it would make, and then they're often turning and going up the street to my neighbors. So I've got all sorts of stuff planted there just to discourage them from running up. Anyway, that's my input. So.
Anybody else in the first row? Second row on about Windale, or just naming.
Jack Brinkman, 74 Wendell Road. And I apologize, I'm a little late catching up on what's going on. I have a lot of things going on. And basically, I'm just finding out about this in the past few days. As I understand it, the amount of the sediment is high, right? Did the state do the testing for the sediment or did the borough?
So our engineer calculated the amount of the sediment, anticipated sediment capture as part of the
Not the
analysis that
capture,
we did.
the sediment that was determined to be too high. Was there testing done by the borough, by the state? Who did the testing to determine that the sediment was high?
Oh, I'm sorry, that was the state.
Okay.
Yeah.
And are those results available on there?
Yes, our MS4 permit, the full permit is available on the borough website. I'd be happy to talk to you after the meeting if you need. Yeah.
And I want to clarify as well, and you tell me if I'm describing this correctly, like, it's not that the state is coming out and doing like very like in the weeds testing of every community. They have basically like a standard formula-ish type thing that they follow, and they put the inputs and it spits out a standard we have to meet. Is that largely your understanding?
Yes. So it's not that they came out and necessarily did testing on every street, you know, in the borough, but they're looking at it from a watershed, and they have various models and metrics that they use to aggregate the figures. So they're looking at it from a watershed perspective, which is why I wanted to explain that we're specifically looking at the East Branch of the Indian Creek watershed because we belong to that watershed. They've analyzed what the reduction is based on the metrics that they set, and then we get assigned that amount that we need to then target for our own reduction.
Right, and they left up to the borough how to remediate
Correct.
the issue?
Yes.
Okay, and were there any studies done showing the alternatives, alternatives available and how they fared in whatever discussion the borough had as to which would be the most successful way to go about remediating?
Sure. I'm actually going to ask Pannoni that. I was not personally here at the time for those discussions, but my understanding is that we looked at various implementation steps that we could take, and the stormwater bump outs kind of came out as the preferred method because of the fact that we own the roads and have the ability to install these on the roads. We don't own a lot of land where we can implement measures. And as Michael explained, some of the areas where we do have kind of the green land, the actual stream banks themselves, even if we were to do remediation in those green spaces, we would not really get nearly as much credit as we are with these proposed bump outs. Tony, I don't know if you can.
Is that analysis done in a document that I could look at? Just want to get
Yes. Yeah. Also, that analysis, the original analysis from 2021, is on our website that shows the identification of all of the proposed bump outs. And then, like I said, we've just been using that and going through on an annual basis to say, you know, we targeted the most sediment capture locations first, but we're also having to navigate, you know, cost versus sediment capture, seeing where that panned out. So that's how we've kind of been whittling down this list. So of the 32, 31 in the original, we've implemented 8 so far.
Yeah.
And then these 2 would make 10 in total.
And another key thing to know, because if you look online, the term's going to be pollutant reduction plan. That's the plan that was originally adopted 6 years or so ago, where they had the conversations over what sorts of strategies to target, what sorts of things they would get credit for or not get credit for, which was kind of, Mr. Brickman, that was kind of the piece that you're asking about. The other thing I want folks to be aware of when you look at that document is that the way that the state gives credit and even some of the things that the state kind of has us on the hook for is it evolves, it's not static. And so every year we are it's a living document, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So every year we are looking at kind of how their crediting has been refined, what sorts of other requirements they may be imposing in the future, which is another aspect of this. So the plan gives you a really good kind of sense of the snapshot of where we're going to try to meet the threshold they've given us. But it's changing and evolving especially as the way that the state approaches this program changes and evolves. So just be aware of that when you're looking at that. And I did pull up the PRP to look at the different projects. Obviously, the stormwater bump outs were the lion's share. There are various other fire retention facilities proposed plan for kind of around the park area as a green space that we own. And then any new development that occurs has to put in water quality facilities as well. So even though it's on private property, we get credit for that towards meeting our goals. So you'll kind of see that listed out in the pollutant reduction plan, but I wanted to provide some of that context so that you know what you're looking at a bit better.
And I think the bigger point is one of the reasons why we don't approve all 32 at once is because with the changing standards each year, we can sort of reevaluate. Oh, if they change a certain standard here, maybe the place that we had thought would be the best bang for our buck ends up not being because they've changed the standards on us. So, if they're cutting our legs out, we don't want to build somewhere and then find out that actually didn't help us nearly as much as we could. I think it's also, I'll be honest in saying that we are sort of behind in our implementation, and the state could, in theory, fine us. But for the last couple of years, they're like, as long as you're making reasonable progress, we're okay with that. And so, if they were on to be real sticklers, we'd be, I don't want to say in trouble, but we'd be much more aggressive in our implementation standards. So, it's a slower rollout than actually we're legally on the hook for right now. And, so in part because, we understand the way it affects the community every time we do two of these. So
I do want to note, we're not the only municipality in that.
Yeah.
Most municipalities are behind. I think the only one I've heard of that may have been on track was Lower Merion.
I was about to say Lower Merion, but they have so much more green. They own so much more parkland than we do that they can actually do stuff within their parks in a much more deliberate and broader way to meet their standards than we ever could.
It doesn't remove
the only place that we really have the ability to do it in theory is Narberth Park, where we can do some work, and then over in the new park over on the south side, which actually turns out doesn't have much of an effect because of the amount of water that flows through the creek there. You can't really do a whole lot of that.
And some of that drains into a different watershed, and some of it doesn't. We have, I think it was described as the coffee filter under a street, which is not a stormwater bump out. It's a different type of facility, but that was part, I think, of the strategy as well. So there was, I mentioned that to just say, I think we started talking about it to give you a sense of what you'll see in the plan when you look it up, context for that, and also that while the plan was adopted prior to my time, my understanding from trying to speak with the folks who were in on that and just read back and learn is that there were a lot of different strategies that were evaluated as part of that overall process.
That was going to be my last question. Any municipalities similarly situated with trying to deal with bump outs specifically? I just haven't seen any. In my driving, I'm probably not looking in the right direction, but these are the only ones I've seen.
You typically don't see them in larger townships where they have parkland, where they have more green space, where they have other areas that are like in the woods, where you don't necessarily see that they're doing these stream bank restorations or installation of other mitigation measures. Where we are, small, we're half a square mile. We're mostly roads and houses. And so the only place where we can really put them is on the roads. So if you go to some of the older boroughs elsewhere in the county, you'll likely see something similar. But certainly Haverford Township, Lower Merion Township, you won't see them in kind of the nearby vicinity because those municipalities just have so much more land, so many more opportunities to implement mitigation measures outside of the roadway right of way.
Thank you.
Anybody else in the second row? Yeah, go ahead.
Vince Quinn, 68 Windale. I'm the last of the old houses before the circle. A personal opinion is that these things are ugly and they're going to stick out like a sore thumb on probably what is the most desirable and nicest street in the borough. That's my personal opinion. Anything that doesn't belong there and sticks out, such as these bump outs, detracts from the overall quality of what you're looking at. There's no question about that. To the part where the object of this is to take out the gunk off of the streets. Windale Road probably has the least amount of gunk of all the streets in the borough. Maybe that 200 block of Dudley or wherever the other thing behind St. Margaret's is. But we just don't generate gunk that Sabine or Essex or Windsor generates. Okay, so it seems out of place that we would put 2 of these on Windale Road to collect gunk when there's no gunk to collect. But I heard something this morning now, it makes it a little bit clearer that the borough can be reimbursed by putting these on Windale Road because it's a least traveled road, which is why it generates less gunk. It doesn't seem to add up there. I would also point out that Windale Road probably has the most green area of any street in the borough. So we're already collecting not gunk, but rainwater and generating less water flow down the street than some of the other streets are. When I think of it in terms of dollars and cents, I can see why the borough is going after Windale Road. And it's probably the #1 priority behind this is we can get reimbursed for this and it's not going to cost us anything. I can understand that, okay, but it just doesn't add up to me. Now, I have done this I've been there for 39 years, and I've done this every time we get a heavy rain. I basically stand on my sidewalk and I watch it starting to generate in the circle, passes my house at a very slow rate, and as it goes down the street goes downhill. Okay, that water just picks up speed and volume and gunk, if there was any gunk. Okay. By the time it gets to the first proposed bump out here, I would doubt if the water is moving at a speed that's collecting gunk that's going to override the 2 or 3 inch curve around these cutouts. And the water is just going to continue to go down the street, pick up speed, and theoretically pick up gunk. Okay. And by the time it gets down to the bottom of the street, the water is really moving, especially if it's a heavy rain. Okay. So it seems to me that if there is any gunk on the street, it's all going to be collected down the bottom of the street. And it doesn't seem that the one in the middle of the road is going to be doing any good. The water is just going to bypass it. It's just going to hit that curb and go around the curb and keep on going down. I have a number of other concerns, but I would want to hear from some of the other people, and it might not be, and there might not be any time for me to get everything in. But the part about Windale Road being able to be reimbursed for the borough for this seems to be the overriding reason why Windale Road was chosen. Essex goes down all the way. I don't know if it's the busiest, but the traffic from outside the borough coming down Sabine in the morning, it's very, very difficult to get around there because that's downhill. There's just a lot of traffic. And my last comment is that most new developments, which we are not, requires 2 ingress and egress points on any street to get emergency apparatus and vehicles up and down. Obviously, Windale Road does not have that. We only have one way in and out. And I'm taking an educated guess that if we have a contractor's truck, which we just about have all the time, parked across from one of these bump outs, emergency vehicles will not be able to get up to where my house is and where the circle is. Okay, that, I know it seems far-fetched, but it's far-fetched things that usually screw you up. Okay, when there's a fire in the circle and the emergency vehicles are trying to get there and can't get there. And again, I have other comments, but I'll defer to the people in the back row.
Excuse my
Oh, I'm
voice.
sorry.
No, it's all right. My name is Martin Harrell. I live at 406 Dudley Avenue. The notice that came out earlier this year about the bump out approvals, I guess jumped the gun and had one coming to Price and Dudley. So I'm going to put my bias out front. I was a 40-year regulator with the federal EPA. So that probably tells you where my comments are going to be headed toward. If anything, I would urge the borough to speed up its implementation progress. 8 out of 31 in 5 years is not, from my way of thinking and experience, reasonable progress. So if I still have my regulator hat on, I would just say the permit you mentioned comes from the state, but it is it's basically flows downhill, the pun intended in this discussion, from the Federal Clean Water Act. The state is implementing that program pursuant to a delegation of authority from EPA. And I might have had some experience with this program in my 40 years as an enforcement attorney. And as Mike pointed out, the borough is subject to enforcement action for non-compliance with the permit. You know, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. I like plants. Are the concrete barriers the most attractive thing I've ever seen? No. But I've lived here long enough. A few years ago, nobody wanted to stormwater control measure in the park. That's sacrosanct. So that was, I will say, taken off the table, but I haven't heard anybody pushing any stormwater control measures in the park area. So they have to go somewhere. And the discussion, I think, Mr. Hickman asked about the measures, the state doesn't come along and say there's a one size that fits all solution. It works with professional engineers and environmental consultants to come up with what's the best and hopefully most economical way to achieve a stormwater control and sediment reduction in this case for the borough. And I guess that is one of my specific questions. The question about reimbursement has come up. What is the average cost? I know it depends on size, but what is the average cost of a bump out? Because I don't know how much of this is being done with in-house labor, like some of the curb cuts are done seemingly with in-house labor. What is the average cost of a bump out construction?
So for construction itself, the construction of one bump out is about $30,000.
And that includes vegetation, planting, the whole, you know, A to Z.
So that includes everything except vegetation. The public works has been vegetating it and planting it and maintaining it. So that price does not get included in.
But just the capital cost is around 30.
Yeah.
In our CIP, I pulled up our CIP. We have,
Capital improvement plan.
I'm sorry, yeah, we pulled up our capital improvement plan, and we generally have planned for about 105,000 per year to demonstrate ongoing progress towards compliance.
Which presumes 3. I think it presumes 3.
It says it presumes 5-year, but it might be 3 at this point. If
No,
given the-
three bump outs for 105. Because I think they're about 3.
The original number assumed 5 bump outs with $105,000, but the costs have increased.
All right.
So with the 105 that we have budgeted annually in our capital plan, we could theoretically get 3. We're also constrained because, as Tony mentioned, Public Works is the ones who actually plant and maintain the vegetation in these bump outs. So they do a lot of maintenance. They're the ones who clear out the sediments. And so we have just very limited staff capacity. And so if we onboard too many at the same time, we then hamper our staff's ability to maintain these properly. So we need to onboard these bump outs in a way that's sustainable to plant them, get the plants established. Once the plants are established, maintenance is a little bit more attainable, and Jeff can speak to that a little bit more. They're perennials, so once they establish themselves, it's a little bit easier to maintain long term. So it's a rollout from both a cost and a staff and maintenance perspective that we have to consider as we navigate all of these different pressures and inputs.
If you want to speak at all to what you guys do to try and make them look attractive.
All right, Mike, I just want to be mindful of our
Yeah,
time
yeah,
as
yeah.
well, so.
Yeah, so maybe we should just keep running through. So can we get into the back row there?
Yeah, Rob Gunther, I live at 104 Windale Road. I've been around, walking around, driving around the borough and seeing the ones that are there. They are eyesores. They are not well maintained. So we walked down from Windale Road this morning and just before that, the meeting. And the one on Dudley Avenue, the broken glass in there, the litter in there, there seems to be no attack to me. And their eyesores can make it away. So I will echo Vince's comments that Windale Road is a critical for environment. It has parking challenges as it is. We have a lot of little kids running around there, and they're on their scooters and their bicycles, and taking away parking spots and making people navigate, people who don't live on the street, navigate around those things in places where the visibility then gets reduced. You're creating dangers. I mean, I would ask, and maybe based on the ones that have already been installed, how close are you to meeting the goals? Are these remaining ones even needed?
Oh, we're not even close. Yeah.
Number of
Yeah, we're nowhere near where we would need to be. So
And how are you able to measure what your progress is towards goal today?
Yeah. Do we want to talk about credit? And I think this is going to speak to a question that Mr. Quinn had as well. But can you talk about the crediting a little bit? And I pulled up kind of the estimated crediting that y'all had provided at our March council meeting, and could see kind of like the spread. And so both, can you speak to how the crediting works? And then also looking at it, it looked like Windale received a significant crediting. Could you speak to why that received the crediting estimates that it did? Obviously, those are our estimates. We have to make that pitch to the state, but
Yeah, so DEP in their documents, they tell us, they give us the calculations to determine how much sediment we need to pull out of the streams and waterways. So based off of those calculations, it's in this PRP report that's been mentioned. I believe that there's about 21,000 pounds of sediment that we need to pull out of streams and waterways through these facilities. And then, so we know that that's our goal, 21,000 give or take. And then beyond that, they also gave us calculations for each different type of facility. So they say, if you want to put in a bump out, here's the calculation that you'll use to figure out how much sediment you're removing with this one specific bump out. They say, if you want to do a stream restoration, here's the calculation. If you want to do this other type of facility, here's the calculation. So with the bump outs, we know what that calculation is, and it's based off of the drainage area or how much runoff the bump out will see. So essentially, the larger the drainage area, the more water that receives or that gets received by these bump outs, the more credit that we'll get. So for these two particular bump outs on Windale, I forget what the exact crediting is, and if you pulled it up, Michael, then maybe you know that answer. But
the one that y'all provided, it said something like
1,285.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, just to point out, so this was the original list I had mentioned earlier, which lists all of the estimated credits. So this is the list that we've been going off of and picking up on things. So if you can see, there's some of them that are less than 500 even, and then a couple that are over 1,000. We have been attempting to target those that are over 1,000. So the one on Windale and Shady, this was assuming a single bump out, but I'm assuming that between the two of them, we would meet or exceed this 1,200 credit.
Is that
available on the website? I'm sorry to turn. Is that available on the website?
Yes, this was included as part of the February 24th infrastructure committee packet. And what we can do is actually pull this out and put this specifically on the website under our MS4 so that it's clearly labeled so that you can reference this. But this was the original one. It hasn't been updated since it was created. And I think maybe what we should do is update it, and we'll put it on the website to include what's been completed and what's still outstanding.
Could you put up the Windale Road one? I don't see that up there.
It's the very top line here.
Oh, I see it.
Yeah, but that assumes by Shady Lane, right? And so.
Yeah, so Tony, I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, so that, when we generated that list, we generated based off of what intersections were close by, just to kind of clarify the general area where the bump out would be located. So yes, when we created the list, we did assume that it would be kind of around that intersection. However, the estimated credits is still close to that number.
And you described this a little bit earlier, but just for instance, when you came out there and you looked at the one area and then the fire department said, actually, you can't put that there. So that's part of it's slowly drilling down and down and down. And for this proposal, you've done a site visit, you've looked at you've talked with different public safety, you've talked with all the stakeholders, and then that's how you refine your proposal for the specific locations. Is that a accurate description of your process?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and just maybe one of the points that I was going to make is, we do talk to the fire department to make sure that they are okay with where we're placing these things, and get their feedback and their sign off on it. So, we do check that every time we put one of these things in. Generally, the perception is that the bump outs actually help slow down traffic. And so from a safety perspective, because people actually have to navigate around it, it actually tends to slow down the flow of traffic. So it actually seems to be, from a safety perspective, that's a good thing, not a bad thing.
I just have to respond to that. Having those additional obstacles there where little ones have to negotiate around that they don't see around. Now, sure, there should be a parent or guardian there to guide them. That's not what it is. I think I really worry that, 3 years from now, we're going to be having a different conversation about what the borough's liability should be for having created that accident.
I'd like to say something to that as well, and I don't live on the street or have a bump out on my street, but driving through Narberth is more difficult than ever. You guys want it to be walkable, you want it to be have bike lanes. The young people across the street with their iPhones in front of them, they don't even look at crosswalks. So people pop out on crosswalks and they don't even look. And so when I drive through Narberth, I'm paranoid. I also drove over a bump out. I've lived in Narberth. We moved to Narberth when I was like 11 years old. I'm 61 now. I've been in Narberth all my life. These kids, I don't know about the little kids, but if they're trying to cross the street and there's a bump out and the car's going to have the bump out and the kid, it's crazy stuff in Narberth right now. And then you're taking away parking. Everyone's complaining about parking. You're going to take away 33 total. We have 18 or 10. I don't know what the numbers, but it's crazy. And I don't see if you have an option to do other solutions. Why can't you just put more grates or something where kids can step on? We can drive over. Can't you put the bump out underground? Can't you come up with some other underground thing? Maybe it comes up and down, but it is. Obstacles in Narberth are crazy. And now you have all these, I'm sorry, I don't want to go off too much, with all these detour signs. The bridges in these and there's detour signs when you come from Marion School and make a right on South Narberth Avenue. You can barely get through those 2 detour signs. You know, I mean, everything that's happening, you guys are adding more and more and more, and someone's gonna get hurt. I agree, and I don't wanna be the one to hit some little kid, and
Can we get your name for the record?
Jenny. It's all gonna be by now.
Okay, last row, and I just want to be a little cognizant of the time because we do have other stuff on the agenda. I do appreciate everybody coming, but we're about to hit.
And then we have folks online too, I think.
Yeah, I know, that's what I was gonna say, is I don't know how many people online want to speak, so other folks in the last row who haven't gotten a chance to speak yet.
Yeah, so I'm Sam McLeod, I live at 100 Window.
Yeah.
And actually have two sets of questions for you guys. One is about the analysis that was done in 2021, you said, or 2022? But the state's revising their calculation every year for crediting. So the state's revising their calculations and we're relying on a 5-year-old test, a 6-year-old test. Where the sediment is coming from, that's a little confusing. And then I want to ask about traffic, but can you help me understand?
Sure.
So was there a study done 5 years ago that we're still using? Is that too old?
I think we've been updating the way that we approach it as well. Is that right? Tony?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say, there's sort of two different considerations, but, one is the crediting, which changes occasionally. So the crediting isn't gonna change. That's why we look to say, are we still gonna get the best bang for the buck where we're putting it? That's separate from, have conditions changed to change what the crediting number in a specific place would be. Does that make sense? So yes, we know that what we did in 2022, what we think the most bang for the buck from that might not still be true. Geography changes, topography changes, building, every time you put up a new building, that's going to have some, potential effect, especially under our code now, depending on where we're building, that we have these basically, in downtown, we now have basically drains underneath the buildings that are doing the same thing as the bump outs in effect. So that's certainly going to change, things around here. And we do, that's why we change it every year, right? Because those things do change. And I think, Tony, you can probably speak to that. Especially like what's happening in the Haverford corridor now, this probably looks very different than it did 4 years ago.
Yeah, I think the best way I can describe it is that the overall permit itself hasn't changed over the last 5 years. So the structure, the foundation of the permit itself is still the same. But every year, DEP is looking at other facilities that other municipalities have done, and they're learning, okay, what's worked well, what hasn't worked well. Do these calculations still make sense, and do we need to revise these slightly to match, what DEP's overall goal is? So the calculations aren't changing drastically. They're changing slightly, and maybe these numbers are off a little bit, but in general they're still good. They're still sound, and they're still reliable.
Okay. So on the crediting numbers though on the list, other than the fact that I think there's 7 others that have a higher credit than Windale, and then I heard that's because it assumed 1. Well, if you put multiple bump outs on the same street, wouldn't that reduce the effectiveness of one of the other bump outs? So it's not just a ×2, right? And we don't even know what that number is, do we?
Yeah, there's if you put them right next to each other, to where if you put them right next to each other, where water's going to hit one bump out, feed that one bump out, and enter one right after that, then that second bump out isn't going to be, it's not going to be doing as much because that first bump out did all the work already. But so there is some, there's some play that we have to do. Like eventually there's a spacing that these bump outs be separated out by to still make that second downstream bump out just as effective as the first one.
It feels a little rushed because we don't even know what the number is. We don't even know what the actual credit calculation is for 2 of them on the same street. Does anybody else have 2 on the same street?
Conway does have 2. There's more space in between it because obviously you have multiple blocks of Conway. Y'all are effectively one block. But that question actually came up when we put in the second Conway one, and I think the answer was in terms of where y'all were estimating the water was coming from. The crediting for the second Conway one was actually going to. So it's not quite the same thing, but
last thing is I think we need to get that really quick. So what is the width of and I've heard it's the same as a car, except the car has accountability and the car can be moved. What is the width of Windale Road post bump out, like across from the bump out? And what's the width of a standard 2-lane road? This is a 2-lane road, and we have issues now with cars being parked and with trucks getting by, particularly the trash trucks, which we don't know about. What's the width of Windale across my bump out?
I can pull it up and get you a good number. I believe it's about between 22 and 24 feet, or maybe even closer to 30.
What's the standard width for a safe 2-lane road?
24 feet for any kind of like shoulder pullover area, not including off-street parking or on-street parking.
Would you run that by me again, please? What is the width and what is for a 2-way street? And how big is Margaret?
So I'll pull up the
Windale, I'm sorry.
So while Tony's pulling that up, so typically a lane width is 12 feet. So a 2-lane road is 24 feet. Typically on-street parking is about 8 feet. So a vehicle's about 8 feet wide. These bump outs are 8 feet.
These ones on Windale are 6 feet.
6 feet.
Yeah.
So this is, so a typical vehicle you would account for 8 feet in width. This is 6 feet. We're getting numbers, but 24 feet would be the width for 2 cars to pass at the same time. So if there is on-street parking opposite the side of the street that a bump out would be, I think what you're asking, what you're getting at is that would reduce the width to below what would be considered safe for, not safe, but the full width for a 2-lane. However, in the kind of, as a result of this width reduction, it serves as a traffic control measure by intentionally creating separated, we call them chicanes in the planning world, right? These little bump outs that kind of create pinch points that force people to then kind of yield for conditions, which helps to slow traffic. So it's a minor inconvenience, but it does have an appurtenant kind of traffic calming, traffic safety benefit, but it's not designed to be a traffic safety measure.
Okay, so then the number of parking spots that we are reducing that is essentially doubling, not just the parking footprint of the bump out. So there's the 50-foot bump out, plus a smaller one.
We would not,
Because you can't park
we're not restricting parking from on the opposite side of the street.
Then you've got a 1-lane 2-way street.
I
And
can
it's
say
a
answer your
yield
question.
condition.
I see the width of Windale is 50 feet wide.
That's the right of way.
Oh, the right of way, my bad,
Yeah.
excuse me.
Yeah.
So the width is
So with this 24.
24. Okay, thanks, my bad. Thank
It's
you.
currently 24.
Yes.
So then it's 18 where the bump out is.
That means if there's
And
a
there-
car parked across from the bump out, it would require.
Someone would have to
One would
pause.
have,
one
somebody would
person
have
would go
to
the other
yield for
person.
It would
somebody
create a
else.
yield condition at that point if there was a car parked
Right.
across the way. Yeah.
Which is similar to conditions we have on very different streets, but like, for instance, Price being like the most extreme example where you have that condition just as is. And I think in those conditions, when we've gone back in and, if there's problems with not being pull-offs, we've gone and created pull-off spots. Though for some streets, it may be that there are just natural pull-off spots and there doesn't need to be additional striping.
Yeah,
Yeah.
We've had it both ways. Some neighbors prefer to lose the parking space to create the pull-off spot because they want that, and other neighbors are like, no, we don't want to lose the parking. It's kind of dependent on the particular street and how tight the parking is on that particular street. And that would actually, we would take your feedback on that in terms of, would you rather have the striping that, basically, I think you probably wouldn't want to, at least initially, lose another parking spot to allow for the pull-off. You'd rather, do the mutual yield situation that you have to do in other places across the borough. So, anyway, I don't know. Yeah, you haven't gotten it.
Edwin McCaskey,
Yeah.
71 Windale. So
to be clear, I do have an objection to this and the placement of this in general. You made a comment earlier, one of you made a comment earlier about all the stakeholder engagement, and I feel like I haven't been, clearly we are a key stakeholder. This thing is placed directly in front of our house, taking away not only our parking, but the entire front facade of the house. And I feel like we haven't been communicated to at all about this process. Obviously, it's moved and now it's placed. I drove around on the way here and looked at all of the different bump outs. Not one of them are directly in front of the front facing, like we talk about curb appeal, these bright yellow, not one of them are directly in front of a house. This takes up the entire front facade of our house. And we have 3 little kids, so all these comments on safety things, and they are an eyesore. And I feel like if people want them, if we need to do them, and up to volunteers, put one in front of every new developer, you know, all these developers coming in. Like, take advantage, if we have to do this, it feels like the placement on this road to all the comments, it's because we're using a calculation.
Sorry, apologies. We lost our internet connection. We are back online. We are ready to take public comments. from those folks online. So Mike, if you
Yeah.
want to,
Yeah, specifically on, if you're online to talk about stormwater bump outs. I can't,
we have James McCauley.
okay. James?
Hi, yes, Mary Beth McCauley here. We live at 63 Windale and have lived here for close to 40 years. We missed a great deal of our next door neighbor Evan's comments, and our internet connection was cut off. However, I support all the concerns that my neighbors have on this regard, and bring one particular anecdote to your attention. Which was one thing that really does bother me is the fact that our street does not have an egress. So anybody who comes in has to pass through the bottleneck at the bottom of the street or the middle of the street in order to leave. We had a situation with one of our daughters was in labor a few years ago, and because of some vehicles parked, I guess they were landscaping vehicles, what have you, seriously delayed her getting to the hospital, where she wound up having an emergency cesarean section. Now, sure, that will probably not happen again, but what if there's a problem with a child on the street or a senior citizen on the street? If there is no other way off our street to get anywhere. So, this is something, the amount of feet, the fire department sign off, etc., the wisdom of the neighbors on the street seems to support the fact that Windale Road is not our answer as a borough to pick up a few extra dollars from the state. And I support, as I said, all my neighbors and all their various points, which are all well-intended and truthful and wise. So thank you.
Anybody else there? Maybe I can't.
If anybody else would like to make a public comment, please raise your hand on Zoom. I don't see any other hands raised. If you can't figure out the hands and you want to just unmute, please go ahead and make your comment. Oh, Maureen. Yep, please go ahead.
Hi, just really quickly, there was talk about having no parking across from these things or something. We don't have street signs on Narberth, and we don't have any lines on the street. And I think that's part of what makes the street attractive. So I hope that we don't turn this into a visual nightmare to work around these bump outs.
Hey, Maureen, can you just identify yourself for the record?
Oh, sorry, Maureen O'Leary, 77 Windale.
Thanks, Maureen.
Oh, and I'm sorry, I just had one quick question also. When was the last time the locations of the creeks leading onto the street were verified? Because I believe they've moved.
Underneath the...
Yeah, there's creeks that run down from Hanson Court, which I think sets the position of these things, how far up the street they are.
Sorry, we're trying to understand the question when you're saying the creek.
There's underground creeks that feed a lot of the water problems that come onto the street. So during a big storm, they rise up, they become above ground creeks. And I believe they've moved over the last 10 or 15 years. So Peter mentioned his used to be a creek house, and he can see, rising creeks in a good rainstorm, and I can see one next to my house too, but I just don't know when they were verified last.
Right.
They're drawn on old maps.
Tony, do you know when we did a hydrology study? If one was...
I know that the Indian Creek was put underground decades ago, and it's been underground via stormwater piping for a very long time. Beyond that, not to my knowledge, have we done any kind of hydrology study or anything in that area.
Yeah, I mean, typically the borough wouldn't be doing hydrology studies. The only time that would have been done was during the land development process when these homes were built. But no, we haven't I'm not aware of any hydrology studies that have been done recently.
Well, and I guess it sounds a little bit like the question might be, and I'm interpreting this, so I don't know if this is actually what the question was, but it sounded like it might be that was there some sort of review of that to inform where to put these? But it sounds like the answer is no, you'll put these there based off of your understanding of kind of where the water is coming at from a surface level.
Correct. Yeah.
Anybody else online?
Anybody else online, please raise your hand. Otherwise, we will close public comment
On this matter?
on this matter, right? Although we
Yeah. I know.
we have a hard
We're
stop
gonna
at 2:30.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So gentlemen, do we want to defer this to council as a whole and give us an opportunity to put this forward without a recommendation?
I mean, I guess well, I'll be interested to know what you all say, but it sounds like there were some items brought up regarding, I think the gentleman talked about concern about being able to get into and out of his driveway for one thing, and there was some other sorts of just kind of consideration of whether there's other spots. I mean, I think that in keeping with the general PRP, I mean, I think that I would move to recommend that we think that the crediting is good on Windale. I think I understand and respect the concerns. I think that Windale, just from everything I've heard and everything I've read and just trying to get up to speed and wanting to continue to move forward with the PRP, that I would say that I would recommend Windale as a spot for the bump outs, and then we can ask Pannoni to, consider some of the placement items that were elevated.
That's what I think that's what I was trying to say is I think you're going to end up with the bump outs on the street. There's just, I don't see the data that would suggest not putting it on the street. The question of the exact placement and whether, we can address the specific concerns on the exact placements for both of these, I think is what I'm suggesting that, we don't necessarily say, yes, we're going to go with these two locations necessarily. Although my sense is that well, I don't even want to say that the shady, the first one is not quite as big a problem as the second one, but I don't even want to make that determination sitting here today. Joe?
I agree.
Thoughts?
I agree.
Okay.
Did I hear that you're going ahead with the project as it is?
No. What we're saying is we're suggesting that the recommendation to council will be to move forward with the presumption that we would be putting bump outs on Windale, subject to further review of exact location and trying to address some of the concerns that you guys raised today in terms of placement and exact placement, and maybe trying to figure out if there's a wider spot on the road, etc. But I think what we're suggesting is a recommendation to move forward with the idea of putting two bump outs on Windale, subject to further potential refinement on location.
We would have Pannoni look at it, I suspect, and Pannoni would come back with, and this was similar to what we did on Grayling, right? I think this is basically exactly what we did on Grayling. There were concerns, folks came forward with concerns. Pannoni looked at it based off of the discussion that had occurred at that committee meeting. Pannoni came back with, some things were able to be addressed, other things weren't able to be addressed, but had a kind of answer provided, and we reviewed all of that. And that's kind of what and you were the one that worked on the Grayling one, right?
Yeah.
So does that kind of general process make sense to you as I've described?
Yeah, I think from the Grayling bump outs, we we more or less came up with a compromise between, the concerns that the residents have versus, our, council and borough's objectives.
Yeah.
And we can take a similar approach here as well.
And from kind of like you feel like you have a good sense just kind of from the discussion here and the kind of all of the things that have been discussed in this meeting as to what you're kind of looking at when you do that review.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, just a question, sir. Would you consider just one and sharing the pain elsewhere in the borough?
Since that's what your calculations are based on, clearly.
I think we would want, I'll only speak for myself. The thing that I would want to know is that we're getting kind of a crediting level that is approaching what we're trying to get out of that area, just personally.
Right. I mean, if one
so
is
that can be
close
get done,
to
that can get done as one.
two,
Yeah.
if that could be done with one, but my guess is it would be placed in a different spot. I'm open to that possibility, but I'm gonna rely on the engineers to tell us that, I think, to a large extent. Can I just, we do have a couple of other things on the agenda, and we do have a hard stop in.
Can we be assured that construction will not start until there's another public meeting where we can voice things?
So it won't get, it has to be approved by council as a whole. So that even if it doesn't come back to us, it has to be voted on by council as a whole, and it would show up on their agenda.
So yes,
And that'll be a
we will have another public
And you would
hearing,
have a public hearing.
likely in the evening at a council meeting. Our council meetings are on Thursday evenings.
Prior to construction.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I now have Evan, because Evan sent an email. So if Evan, if you're sort of willing to be my point of contact, primary point of contact, is that, can I put that burden on you to? Yeah, no, I know, but just like it, especially like if it's coming up on the agenda, I won't have everybody's email to put it out there. It does show up on the calendar, but it would be good if.
Do you want to circulate a pad so people can write down where you?
I think the easiest way to do.
Why don't we just
That's almost
email you guys?
Yeah,
and then we'll have your email address.
Yeah, if you, that's what I was gonna say. If you email me as head of infrastructure, then I will have all of them. And I can create a group email. Yeah, I can create a group email.
And that chart is available, they put up there with all.
Yep, that's all on the website.
Yeah, so that was on the February 24th, 2026 infrastructure committee packet. And like I said, we're gonna work on providing additional updated information on the page, so you don't have to go into the packets to find this information.
It appeared that there were like 2,000, 3,000 up there when, Wendell Road was 1,000.
Well, we've already implemented some of those that are in the multiple thousands, yeah.
But we can compare things.
Yep.
I can download the chart.
Yeah.
What's the email address that we can send?
So it's my email, msalmonson, msalmonson.
msalmonson.
SALMANSON @ narberthpa.gov.
No, narberthpa.gov.
.gov. I always get it backwards. narberthpa.gov.
I just have one more comment
Yeah.
before you guys move on, if
Okay.
you don't mind. Is there any, or has it been done, Tony, have you gone to that street, like when it's raining? Looked at it?
I'm not,
Or are you only looking on paper? Because it seems to me if you walk down the street, when it's raining, pouring rain, you don't know. And maybe that would help you guys.
And just remember, it is not a stormwater management system, right? So it's, right. I mean, we're trying to capture the flow, but it is, so, when it's, it's not necessarily designed for the time when you have the downpour. It's the best way to say it, because we're not managing the stormwater flow, right? It's overall capture. So it's.
Well, we say that, but we have indications that the state may actually add on volume control as part of it. So volume is a component of it, even if the goal is water quality. Okay.
Well, when I look at North Essex Avenue, the second block, I was there this weekend. I was here all weekend. The rain comes all down the left side. No, I'm so sorry. There's where the bump out is. And the rain comes all down the right side. So why they didn't put the bump out on the right side, I don't know. But that gets flooded there, like a swimming pool, and the tunnel gets flooded, whatever. But I would think if you're trying to catch sediment, move it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not an engineer. But I would think that if somebody goes there when it's, you know, or whatever conditions there are that you're trying to catch the sediment, it's the best way to make the decision, rather.
I've got to cut us off because
We have 5 minutes
we
left,
have
but we haven't
literally
gotten to
5
any
minutes,
emails
and we
from
have to
citizens,
get a
so-
couple of things in front of Borough Council at the next meeting, which we can't do unless we approve it here. So, if I can move on to the safety fencing, this is.
This does relate to the bump outs, if y'all want to stick around for this.
We
can
have not
talk
actually
about-
taken a vote, by the way.
Oh, okay.
So we need to take.
So I think our vote is.
I think I had outlined to
Yeah.
recommend Windale and provide kind of direction.
Additional
Tony has
direction.
outlined. Yeah.
Right, before putting it in front of council for final approval.
Well, he'll come.
He would
He'll
come
come
back.
forward to, or I guess that's the question. Is this slated to come back to infrastructure or go to council? And I think just
At this,
procedurally.
I mean, at this point, if you're not approving the locations, then Pinoni has to go back and look at the plan set again and make some changes. So it could come back to infrastructure, or if you want to defer it, if you feel like you've provided your input enough, then we could take the plan set. So I'd have to talk to Tony after offline to figure out when revised
Yeah,
plans
the
can be
timing,
submitted.
that wouldn't work to get it in front of council because
Well,
our
I'd
next
have
meeting's
to-
in 2 weeks, so.
Well, let me talk to Tony and see
Yeah.
what the turnaround time
Okay.
could be, if that comes
Okay.
before council at the next business meeting, or if it needs to wait another month.
Okay,
also
so
want to-
either way, we'll expect
There'll be a
Some-
documentation. of it,
some
yeah.
formal response to us so that we're not making yet a formal recommendation to council on location. Does that sound fair?
Yeah, we're just
Okay.
at a high level, we're recommending yes, and then Tony's
The-
gonna look at it.
If I may recommend that you amend the motion to suggest that you recommend the design plan subject to the reconsideration of specific location, you know, pending the engineer's review.
Sure, I'll make that motion.
A second.
All in favor? Okay. Okay, so Tony, you got your marching orders.
Yep.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
Okay, sorry to put more work on you.
All good.
Okay,
I'll move to recommend safety fencing for discussion.
A second.
Yeah, so after seeing the way that they do the bump outs, you know, so the picture that's in the packet is from, I believe, 64th and Drexel Avenue, you know, so on the way to the zoo that I take. Really liked the level of safety that the small fence gives you, you know, as a pedestrian along the sidewalk. So when I saw this, I reached out to our engineering firm who actually does these for downtown, and you know, they put us in touch with the contractor, you know, with the Ironworks place that makes these. You know, I put it together a quick price quote of that of $8,560. That would do all of the bump outs. If you choose to exclude the bump out on Essex, since that does abut, you know, turf birch there. My crew would handle the install of this, you know, because the company wanted about $75 a section to install. So just wanted to put this out there to see what you folks want to do. I think it's a great way to kind of add, you know, a level of safety for pedestrians and that would really, you know, wheel obstacles.
So they've had good experience with this.
and it's metal or it's
Yeah, it's iron.
and upkeep would be de minimis, like it's not gonna crack and peel and make it all like.
Around 12 to 18 inches or so. Get a lot of extra.
These are on, these,
think I know what
Jeff,
that
would
is.
you be on the street side or the sidewalk side? Sidewalk side.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to trust Jeff's analysis of these, and My experience has been that when Jeff brings something forward, he's done a lot of
Yeah.
thinking and looking into it and testing it with other municipalities. So I'd be in support of accepting the staff recommendation.
I'm in agreement.
Is the motivation behind this, Jeff, aesthetics, safety, what would be the motivation?
Just keep it folks safe, I don't want folks to fall in there.
Thank you.
I think it's a good idea. And I think it aesthetically doesn't look bad. I kind of like the way it, creates a defined space, more of a defined space. And from a visual standpoint, maybe it helps visually the drivers who have banged into our things, if they see a little elevation there, especially in the winter time. Like, in the summertime, you've got the shrubbery coming up, the perennials coming up. In the wintertime, it's more sparse as seeing. So I'd be okay with that. Okay. All in favor? Okay. Okay. You want to do the capital, the library? I think we're pretty aware of the issues. If you want to talk about the vestibule.
But do we have to intersection redesign and restoration? Do we have to vote on the recommendation for the?
Oh, you're
for
right.
the,
That's a separate issue. Thanks.
Turning
Thank you,
radius?
Michael. Yep. Well, so the question is again, do we want to
Add alternate.
do it on both sides?
Yeah.
Is there a?
So I'll move base. So I'll move so that we can have a base motion to discuss.
Yeah.
I'll move recommendation of intersection redesign and restoration, Windale and Chamberlain.
Jay, you want a second?
Yeah, I second that.
Okay. So the question is the redesign only cuts the angle on one side. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And is there a reason why not to do it on the other side as well? I think that's Cornwall's property, right?
I mean, maybe you guys can speak to whether or not there was a reason. But from what I understand, only this section was a point of discussion, so there wasn't anything for or against the other side.
Yeah, I think widening it on one side only, there's still room, to allow vehicles that are exiting from Shady that are making them right on Windale. Even widening it on one side, it still gives them the room to kind of scoot over and swing a bit wider as they need to. We looked at, just how cracked up the one sidewalk lot was. This is hit over the years, from past haulers, UPS, Amazon, trucks are getting bigger, heavier, and more frequent in the borough. So, I think that just widening the one corner, will get us by, with the issue that we're having up here.
Is there a downside to widening both sides? I'm usually not in favor of widenings because I think generally they impact the pedestrian realm. But in this, I mean, we were described kind of like, delivery trucks and things of that nature. Some sensitive to that. Is there a reason not to widen it or to take a look at widening both sides?
We could certainly have the engineers do a traffic study and just a turning, map there to see, if we do need to widen both sides, if vehicles can make that turn, if we widen one side only. But yeah, I'd be interested to see that.
Okay.
Tony, we did have our traffic engineer look at this though, yes?
I don't believe you saw this. We did this internally. Yeah. Because there wasn't really anything traffic related besides the fact we were trying to avoid, vehicles, going up and over the curb. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there any public comment?
If you want, just very quickly.
Well, the reason that there's no vehicles going up over my side of the curb is because I fiercely defend it. And Jim is not able to.
Yeah.
He is. So the trucks, when I put up on my posts and my flower plantings, they go over to Jim's and they run over his, but they would gladly run over mine too.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and because there's cars parked right at the bottom, right at the bottom shaded on Windale, because my neighbors have to park there, and they have more than one car in their household. Then the big trucks swing by, wanting to go up right, invariably, barely make, I've lost so many traffic tolls and little cement animals that I put there and things. So I think just in terms of traffic flow, if we are gonna have larger trucks, you need to expand both sides and protect the cars that are parked across the street. I don't ever park in front of my house because I've had so many cars run into right there. And I'm happy to have more traffic calming. And normally I'd be in favor of restricting the traffic flow, but no one seems to be making these trucks any smaller. I would send smaller trash trucks out there, but that doesn't seem to be on the table, so.
Yeah, so I move to amend my recommendation to include a recommendation that staff look at doing it on both sides. There's a second for that amendment.
I just want to check it's $29,000 for the one side. I'm guessing it would be double-ish that for both sides. Is that fair?
That's a fair assumption. Yeah.
I second.
All in favor?
Well, that was in terms of making the amendment or in terms of the underlying motion?
The amendment.
Okay, so
To explore, not to recommend.
Right,
Just
to
to
both
explore,
sides,
because there's a significant cost. Not the balance the cost benefit. Okay.
So then we voted on the recommendation, now we vote on the base motion?
As amended.
As amended.
Yes.
Okay.
All in favor? Yep. Okay.
So that, if that wasn't clear, because it was a little like parliamentary stuff, that includes the recommendation to look at the both sides.
Recommended to look at the potential to do the change on both sides.
Right. There should only be one vote.
So I don't know if we voted on the amendment.
Motion.
Wanted to make sure that,
Okay.
yeah,
And then as
we voted to amend the base motion just to make sure that everyone was in agreement on that piece of it first. Yeah.
Okay. Discussion capital expenditure. Do we have time?
I can't.
Okay. Okay. And I'll just say very quickly, capital improvement plan, Maggie and I have started sort of laying out the timeline for the capital improvement plan for the rest of the year. It's a very deliberate process. You've probably heard about me talk about it in other meetings about the need for long-term capital improvements. There's been a lot of deferred maintenance in the borough, and so we try to be very deliberate and mindful of the things that we need, which of course means we have to have the revenue to pay for it. So
I'll just mention very briefly, what's in the packet is the existing capital improvements plan that we adopted as part of the CIP last year. It includes the master list of everything that is in the capital plan, regardless of whether or not it's been implemented. And then I included a chart that shows the implementation of the things that were in the capital plan that were approved for this year and where we are in implementing those and paying for those. So looking at the total cost of everything that we have this year. So moving ahead, looking at next year, we'll have continued conversations about what we're going to be discussing. So as Mike said, this was just kind of the first foray into that. Unfortunately, we are well past our time today, so unable to get into more details, but we'll be having small group meetings with council members, and then this will be discussed over the course of the next couple of months at public meetings. So please feel free to stay tuned. We'll have things in the packets, and obviously at the meetings themselves, we'll be having discussion.
okay. I think I'll defer our internal commission reports and public health and safety and F&A, since we're all members of those, so it doesn't, we won't be surprised by anything. Just very briefly, slight delay on the Amtrak bridge, nothing major. It doesn't affect the long-term. I know there was some chatter on Facebook about this. It doesn't affect the long-term scheduling. It just has to do with some permitting from the PICO, right? But we've gotten that now, right?
Yeah, it was a scheduling delay with PICO. They were able to move it up by a week. It's a pole installation. They're moving forward with it. So we're working with our contractor, with our construction manager, and all of the utility companies to continue the project. So things are moving. I know it doesn't seem like a lot's happening, but it's all the utility disconnect work right now. So things are progressing.
Okay, public comment unrelated to stormwater bump outs. I know Gigi's been very patient, so.
Gigi Michael, 206 Wayne Avenue. We had asked, not myself, sorry, Friends of Sabine Park has sent a question to the office regarding expenditures for our parks, so that being larger Canadian City Park and then of course Sabine Park. What we were looking for was what was budgeted versus actual. We put in that request and we were told that we should file a right to know, and then we did, and then that was denied. So I'm kind of wondering if I could get that information today, that would be great. So in 2025, what was allotted? What did you spend on both parks?
Do we break that out specifically in the capital improvement plan? We don't
We-
by park, right?
We don't know. So the reason why it would have been denied is because that's all in our budget. So in terms of what was allocated would be in the line item that's for parks and maintenance. I forget the account code specifically. Jeff, 454,000, right? So if you go into our budget and you look at the line item 454.000, that's our parks and maintenance budget.
25 is still there.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so that's gonna tell you what we had budgeted for the year, and then we publish the actuals. Once the audit is not yet done for 2025, so we don't have audited final numbers for our total expenditures from 2025. So that's why it was denied, because the information either doesn't exist yet, or it's already publicly available on the website.
Thank you. When is the audit going to be completed?
Very nearly soon, we'll have it published as soon as it's ready.
Yep.
And who's on finance and administration?
It's me, Michael, and Jim.
Jim's the chair. And the audits, I have it up right now. We have the audits going all the way back to 2014 online, and we have budgets going back to 2015 online. And every year from there.
And who's the chair of this committee?
Me. Okay. Thank you so much, everybody. Thanks for coming out. We do appreciate, your
Thanks very much.
all time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess I have to move to adjourn.
Is there any public comment from online, or
Oh.
is there anyone on there?
I believe everyone has dropped off.
Okay. Move to adjourn. Michael,
Move to adjourn.
I second.
all in favor? You.